Welcome to the annual meeting 2008. This is the curtain raiser for the meeting. Very proud to be welcoming a very, very good cast of co-chairs. I'll ask each of them in turn to just give us maybe 2 minutes on what they think are the key challenges facing us in the coming year. Since we have so many important people, I will take it in alphabetical order, so as not to offend anyone. Mr. Tony Blair, that leaves you to start the proceedings.
Thanks very much, Mark. Well, first of all, can I say I'm delighted to be here in Davos as a co-chair of what is a fantastic gathering of people from all different walks of life, but interested in the big global challenges that face us. I think to summarize it very briefly, this is a moment, obviously, of greater insecurity and uncertainty and challenge in the world today. But I think it makes a meeting like this all the more important. And the themes of the meeting, as you know, are the ideas of collaboration and innovation as the answer to the big global challenges. In the work that I will be doing in Davos this week, I will concentrate in particular on 3 things. The first will obviously be the Middle East, the Middle East peace process, and I'll have an opportunity not just to discuss the state of the political process, but also how we are able to attract business and investment into the Palestinian territories, which is a vital part of making progress there. But also we'll have a chance to discuss some of the broader issues in the Middle East. Secondly, there's the issue of climate change, and even with obviously the more challenging economic situation we have at the moment, we should not forget that 2008 will be a crucial year to see whether it's possible to get the outlines or the framework of a deal on climate change at the G8 this year in Japan. That'll be a major question. What role can business play? What is the right balance between how we make sure that we get the developed world with the right obligations, the developing world part of the deal? That will be a major part of the discussion we have. And then the final issue that I will be talking about is also collaboration and innovation in terms of how cultures work together, how people of different religious faiths and cultures work across not just national boundaries, but the boundaries of those cultures and faiths, and come together and try and resolve some of the key questions that arise from a rapidly changing world. And as I say, I think this is a conference that takes place with a certain backdrop, obviously, of insecurity and uncertainty and challenge, but it makes the issues of collaboration and innovation all the more important. Thank you.
Mr. Dimon, Chairman and Chief Executive of JPMorgan, if you could give us your thoughts.
And so welcome, and I'm also very happy to be here with this group of people. And I think I'd put number 1 on my list, what Tony was talking about, is world peace, particularly in the Middle East, and avoiding religious conflicts around the world. If we can get that behind us, it'd be a wonderful thing for humanity. I think the second would be energy and environment. I think they're directly related. I think they're important how they're handled for humanity going forward. The third would be education. And the fourth would really be to make sure we have a global system which promotes growth in a fair way. I think there are legitimate complaints about some of the negatives from growth, but it has pulled billions of people out of poverty over the last 20 or 30 years, and we need to keep the engine going to accomplish all the things we want to accomplish. Thank you.
Mr. Kamath, the CEO of ICICI Bank.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I guess that the main themes have been articulated. Within those themes, what I'd like to see is really, while addressing peace and climate, also the issue of inclusiveness, because you have a large part of the world where you have people without access to so many things, whether it is health or whether it's education or whether it is, I would say, access to jobs and so on. How could we innovatively collaborate to meet the aspirations of these people? There are several sessions where this would be discussed, and I think that would be of immense interest to me, and I would work as a collaborator in trying to work out how this could benefit the larger good across the nations.
Thank you. Mr. Kissinger.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I was here in the early days of Davos when it was a meeting of a few hundred CEOs passively listening to lectures. Now, I started out in life as a historian, and I am interested in all the topics that have been mentioned here from the point of view of the structural changes that are going on in the world. The change in Europe from the state system to the European Union, the shift in the center of gravity of the world from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and the emergence of problems like climate, environment, energy, that can only be dealt with on a global basis and that have not ever been apparent in this manner before. And above all, in the current economic crisis, I'm interested in the fact that the economic organization of the world is global, but the political organization of the world is based on sovereign units and nations. The consequences of globalization will be experienced by people who go to national political leaders to solve them, and how to bring together the global structure of economics and the political structure of politics seems to be one of the issues in which I hope to learn a lot while I'm here.
Thank you. Indra Nooyi, CEO of PepsiCo.
Thank you, Mark. It's delightful to be here in Davos. I think the timing for this meeting couldn't have been better, because we're meeting at a point when the world is in a state of uncertainty because of the financial crisis, but it's also the first test of real globalization. Because the world is globalized, can the world in fact weather an economic downturn in one developed economy or the other? I think this is the first time we're going to test it, and whether economies, the growing economies of India and China, can actually see us through this sort of a global economic slowdown in some parts of the world. So that's the first thing I think makes this Davos very interesting. But I think there's a bigger test in this session of Davos. In spite of the economic crisis that is definitely going to be front and center in all our discussions, can we in fact look beyond that and view Davos as an incredible collection of the conscience of NGOs, governments, and corporations to come together to address issues that can be addressed? For example, we all signed up to the Millennium Development Goals. The progress on the MDGs is not as much as it needs to be. I'm here in Davos because we are one of the signatories to the MDGs, and we'd like to see NGOs, governments, and corporates come together to move the agenda on the MDGs, especially in the area of water and agricultural practices. So I'm here in Davos to see what the conversation is going to be about progress on MDGs, and my hope is that we are all in Davos with an incredible can-do spirit, but with the must-do responsibility to move this agenda forward. If we manage to move from discussion to decision and from research to action, I think we'll all feel very, very good about this incredible collection of people in this incredible town.
Great. David O'Reilly from Chevron.
Well, thank you, and I am also delighted to be here. I know that there's a lot of concern about the economic situation of the world today, but I think looking long term, one of the reasons I'm here is to talk a little bit about energy. We are seeing growth in energy demand, and it has been sustained and steady because hundreds of millions of people have been moving out of poverty into the middle class. However, despite those movements, there are still billions of people who are undersupplied for energy today. So one of the challenges the globe faces is how to supply energy in an environmentally sound way and meet the needs of these hundreds of millions and billions of people that have yet to reach the quality of life and the standard of living that we all achieve or hope to achieve in our lifetimes. So this is a big challenge, and I think it tests the very theme of this conference, which is both innovation and collaboration, because I think it's going to take both. And I hope that at the end of this session of Davos this year that we will leave with some commitments, some better understanding, and some action items to move forward from the private sector as well as from the public sector. So I look forward to it, and I hope at the end of this week we will leave with some actionable items that will help meet those needs for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wang from China Mobile.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be one of the co-chairs here. I think the collaborative innovation is very important to all industries and the businesses of the world. The companies of all countries need to take social responsibility, and they need to pay attention to climate change and other global challenges. We need to have joint efforts to energy conservancy and the emission reduction. We need to have joint efforts to innovation. So I think both correct cooperation and innovation are very important to the world today.
Thank you very much. We have a short time for some questions. I would urge you to keep the questions to topics relating to Davos and the global agenda. We won't be taking any other questions. If you could wait for a microphone, say who you are and which organization you're from. And the gentleman down here in the front row, Matthias.
Carl Lavin from Forbes.com. You talked about action items. Are there action items that any of you would suggest any government should take now on an urgent basis to address the crisis you've addressed or the insecurity you've mentioned in each of your talks? This is a comment, a question on things that each of you have brought up in your initial comments. Thank you.
Sure. Who would like to take that question first?
I'll go first.
Fine.
I'll speak about the Millennium Development Goals and water in particular. You know, in the private sector, when we take on an initiative, we make sure there's an owner for the initiative, and they drive that initiative until it gets to completion. It would be wonderful if we could come out of Davos on MDGs, which is what I talked about. For each of those MDGs, let's assign an owner, and let's make sure that person brings the relevant bodies together to move this forward. Because people like us have signed on to it, we just don't know who owns the MDGs and how to move it forward. So this is what I mean by discussion to decision and research to action.
Anyone else like to add something to that, or should we?
On the energy front, I would like to see a much broader and more aggressive focus on energy efficiency, which I think is absolutely essential if we're going to meet the needs of the globe going forward.
I would just add to that, I think all of us would love to see Doha round successfully ended and to apply as much pressure we can to make that happen. I think that'll take both governments, businessmen, and almost just about everybody.
Thank you. Yes?
I will attend a special forum on the issue for the global citizenship, and we will concern about the energy convergency for all industries. That will be the real action for us.
Good. Another question. Yes, gentleman down the front here.
Stuart McDill, Reuters. It's a question for Mr. Blair. Do you think that the market meltdown, Mr. Blair, will detract attention away from what you want to achieve here, particularly with reference to Middle East peace talks?
I mean, I think the context in which Davos takes place, especially with so many leading people from the business and the financial world, is bound to some extent to be dominated by the situation in the world economy at the moment. But I actually think one of the good things about Davos is that people are willing to look beyond the immediate as well. And I think in respect to the Middle East and climate, and also what Indra was saying about Millennium Development Goals, no, I think you'll find a focus on all those things as well. And to be frank, I mean, I think there will be a lot of discussion about the uncertainty and insecurity that the present financial situation gives rise to. But I think if you're looking for the action points out of the conference, I think they will be around the Millennium Development Goals, the issues to do with climate change, both government and private sector responsibility, energy and energy security. And I think that anybody looking not just at the political situation, but at the economic situation, has got to take the Middle East and the Middle East peace process, but the broader Middle East, extremely seriously. And I also think there are the issues that Henry Kissinger was mentioning earlier, to do with the change in dynamic in world power, which is now with us. I mean, in a sense, is represented by the co-chairs of this conference. So, no, I mean, I'm sure there will be a lot written and spoken about the world economic situation, but I think one of the benefits of Davos is that people are able to take a step back and look at some of these longer-term challenges too, and I think you'll find probably greater action points on those than on the immediate situation in the financial markets.
Yes, gentleman back there. Yeah.
My question is also to Mr. Blair. Mr. Blair, when you were Prime Minister of the UK, you were strongly advocating for structural reforms in Europe, economic reforms, and now that we are in a crisis, do you think Europe is well equipped and flexible enough, the European economy, to face this crisis as you would have like back 5-10 years ago?
Well, I think the irrespective of the current economic situation, the fact is the world is rapidly changing as a result of globalization, technology, the rise of China, India, and other new economic powers, and the impact of the emerging markets in the world. And I think that for all of the Western countries, Europe included, you know my view, which is that there has to be a constant process of reform and adjustment and adaptation and meeting the challenge of change. And I think that holds good in situations of financial difficulty and challenges as at the moment, but actually it was the same a year ago when the financial situation was more benign. I just think that in today's world there is a need for us constantly to look at how we enter into new markets, maintain our competitive position, develop higher value-added goods and services. This is with us irrespective of what happens at the moment. And I think that's why you find such interest and focus in virtually every country in Europe at the moment on long-term structural economic reform, as you can see indeed from the report that was just published, I think, this morning about France. I mean, this is with us. This is part of the world. It's the world in which we live, and we adapt to it or we fall behind.
Another question for the panel, please. Yes, gentleman there.
Thanks. Stephen Castle from the International Herald Tribune, also for Tony Blair. Prime Minister Yurchan of Hungary this morning said that although even if we do have a recession, energy prices may lower, food prices are still going to remain high, and therefore this is an ideal opportunity to reform the common agricultural policy. I know that this has been a theme of yours in the past. Do you think there's any realistic prospect of that opportunity being taken this year? Now we have a fundamental review of the EU budget, and perhaps for Dr. Kissinger, whether he would see an opportunity for the US to take advantage and reduce subsidies, farm subsidies in the US too.
I mean, obviously, my views on change in the CAP are well known, and I do think that the budget review, which was secured as part of the financial deal when I was the President of the European Union back in 2005, I mean, I think that is an opportunity for us to look at how we modernize the European budget, but the detail of that will obviously be a pretty tough negotiation. I just would like to pick up on one point that Jamie Dimon mentioned earlier. I do think that one undercurrent of discussion here, which would be very useful, is an attempt to revitalize the world trade talks, which at the moment are stalled. This is really important. And in fact, at a time of economic challenge, although the pressures politically, I think, will be basically, I fear, protectionist rather than towards more open trade, in fact, this is a moment where it would be sensible for us to put, if we're talking about collaboration and innovation, getting those world trade talks back together and moving forward again would be a fantastic thing for the world economy, and I really think it's a major priority. As for the reforms within the European budget, as I say, I think there'll be some fairly tough talking this year, but not. I suspect that this won't arise particularly at Davos.
Mr. Kissinger,
what's it about world trade? Well, this is not a great year in America for far-sighted internationalist economic policies. And I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of talk that not only sounds protectionist, but is protectionist from the various candidates, particularly while they're in the primaries. But most I would say everybody who is concerned with long-range American policy agrees with what Tony Blair has said. We need to activate the World Trade talks, and we need to strengthen the global international system. And I believe that that the existing administration will do the best it can, and the new administration should and almost certainly will take a broad view of the issue.
Good, thank you. Another question. Do you have one over from this side of the room, maybe? Yeah, the lady there in the back, in the blue. Yes, in the blue jumper. Yeah.
Thank you, Bridget Kendall from BBC. You've talked about the current economic uncertainty. I'd like to ask members of the panel, do you think here in Davos there will be a concerted effort to send a message to the United States to try and do something about its own economic situation, to put its house in order because of concerns of the ripple effect that that has throughout the world?
Who would like to deal with that one first? David, do you?
Well, let me give a shot at it. I think that that the United States economy will correct itself, and perhaps even more quickly than people realize. It is a pretty big and resilient economy. I also subscribe to the view that it isn't going to impact the rest of the globe as much as maybe as it has in the past. So I think there's a degree of pessimism about the economy that that belies really what's happening. So I'm an optimist when it comes to the length of what may be a slowdown or a mild recession. And I do think that if we look past the immediate year, that the outlook is still pretty good. So I think this correction that's underway may be overdue. It may seem like we're going through a crisis, but I hope we don't get caught up too much in this immediate issues that we're facing on the financial front, because I think it will detract from many of the underlying longer-term issues that we've all been discussing here that I think warrant a lot of discussion and continued momentum despite the current concerns.
Anyone like to add?
Yeah, I would just add that I think you have I don't think the United States wants to have a terrible economic time. And you have a fully engaged administration, I think a fully engaged central bank. I think you have central banks around the world who are fully engaged. But I will also caution that the world economy is extremely complex, and I'm not sure the tools that even policymakers have at their fingertips could just solve things the way that a little bit like the implication of your question was. And we've had financial crises every 5 years for the last 100 years. And they all come from a different nature, a different sort, and they all have been resolved. And so I think people are doing everything they can to mitigate the negative effects of a potential downturn, but I'm not sure that anyone can completely stop how it's going to unfold.
I think we have time for two more quick questions. So, yes, gentleman at the back here. Yeah.
Hi, I am Saurav Majumdar from the Financial Express, India. My question is to Mr. Kamath. I would like him to respond to what Ms. Nooyi said about whether India and China are, ready to take on the responsibility, in a sense, of mitigating the global financial risk.
I think it's a good question. I would still say that it's early days. What we'll have to see is whether the current crisis that is impacting or could impact several economies is going to have an impact on India or China. Then we will have an answer whether the role is changing. I think to some extent, at least from the Indian context, as of now, we are not seeing any significant impact. But it is early to say. We will need to see how this crisis shapes and then whether there's an impact. If this time around, India and China can demonstrate that global crisis we are dealing to a large extent, and then we could probably have these two economies put in that context.
Thank you. One final question. There's a gentleman just in front, actually, who was wanting to ask a question.
Well, my question was the same, but except to the rest of the panel as well. I mean, do you see any role for India and China in the current kind of, that's the other two countries you hear most mentioned at Davos?
Could you say who you're from as well?
From IANS, Indo-Asian News Service, news agency. From Tony Blair, who's been to India several times, maybe can lead it off.
I think I'm not sure, to be honest, in the short term that it's going to be quite like that, although obviously it is important that the growth is sustained in China and India. But I think that over the medium and longer term, it is really important that we have the right economic and indeed political relationship with both India and China, because I think the centre of gravity politically and economically in the world is shifting. And I mean, I think for a lot of the people who have been coming to Davos for some time, and I have now for some years, what is interesting is the degree to which there is a whole dimension of the Davos debate now that is very much centred around the role of China and the role of India and also the other emerging economies in that region in the world today. So I think it's quite hard to assess actually short term what the difference is, but I think long term, yes, I think there's no doubt at all. How those economies develop, what their relationship is with the rest of the world is going to be really important. And there is something I think that, again, is going to be quite an interesting part of the debate at Davos this week. You see, I think that with the greater insecurity and the challenge, the danger is that people become timid and lacking in ambition in terms of political leadership, whether it's on climate or on Millennium Development Goals or it's on world trade. There are going to be pressures that push us towards taking a short-term view, looking at the very immediate economic situation, not casting our eyes a little bit up towards the broader horizon, whereas actually the answer to all of these problems is to open up and collaborate and engage still further. And I think that will be one underlying tension I think you will find in the debates, that for example, on the issue of climate change, there is a risk that people become concerned about the pressures and the strength of the action that is necessary when they've got all these other concerns, particularly of an economic nature, to be taken into account. Yet, in fact, this is the moment when, if we demonstrate that there is a collective will in the international community, whether it's on climate change or on tackling world poverty or on world trade, in actual fact, I think we give greater confidence to people in the business community, and also long term we strengthen the arrangements whereby, as different parts of the world suffer a downturn, other parts of the world are more able then to take up positions of growth and leadership.
Yes.
I'm from China. I'm confident that China will keep its stable growth of its economy and will keep its stable financial situation. I think it will give a very positive affection to the world.
Good. Anyone else? Thank you very much indeed to the panel for the work you have already put in and the work we expect from you over the next 5 days. Thank you to everyone. I hope you all have a very fruitful and rewarding 5 days. Thank you. Thank you.